right, you guys, it's episode 5 of Curb Talk, and today is going to be something a little different. So check it out, you guys. As you guys already know, this is the 5th episode of Curb Talk that I'm dropping. And, during the first couple of episodes, I basically reached out to you guys and I asked you for some suggestions or any kind of ideas of what you think Curb Talk should be about. I'm just looking for a little bit of advice before I make a final decision. But in the meantime, in between time, what I'm going to do is what I've been doing. The first couple of episodes, I had on a couple of former COs and I interviewed them. I believe one or two of the other episodes were just about things that I thought might be of common interest for you guys, things that are beneficial to talk about. And that's basically what I'm going to do today. I'm going to hit you with the quick drive-by. And this is something that I think, people need to be aware of what's going on. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring awareness to this right here because it's something that's important. It's affecting a lot of people out there. And, there's people that stay in the know. They read the papers. They read, they stay up on the media. They know what's going on out there in the world, whether it's a new drug that's hitting the scene, whether it's, world affairs, politics, whatever it is, there's people that stay up to speed with what's going on. And, this is one of those things that I think people need to be aware of, especially if you're somebody that struggles with addiction. Now, earlier today, I was on my phone and I was looking for some material for another video that I was working on. And I got hit with a blog, and it was basically about a drug that has been out. It's been out for a minute, not that long, I believe a couple years, but now it's starting to really hit the West Coast. It's already been out in the East Coast. And, this article talked about some of the side effects and, what the drug was made of and how it's being used as an additive to cut other drugs. And, then there was the pictures, and that article led to another drug that came out recently. And then that led to another drug that came out. So I want to talk about all three of them. Now, once I read a couple articles and I got a little bit familiar with each one and, the detriments, I looked on YouTube and I wanted to see if anybody covered it. And it's not surprising that Josh covered something like this a couple days ago. And I commend him for that. Josh is an intelligent dude. And I didn't watch the video, but I'm sure that he covered it the way he should have covered it. Bringing awareness to it, talking about the side effects, talking about what it does to people, and just the long and short-term effects that people need to be aware of. So I'm going to talk about these 3 drugs. This is going to be kind of short. This is just something that I want to put out there. Now, there's 3 drugs. One of them is called Tranq. That's the street name for it. It's called Tranq. The clinical name is xylazine. And, the consumption of this drug, it makes the skin, well, they call it the zombie drug. But those that consume it, it makes your skin it discolors the skin and it makes it look scaly, like a zombie. So that's why they call it the zombie drug. And it's real easy to make, and it's called the poor man's heroin because it's cheap. So I'm going to get into each one of them. The second one is called Krock. That's the street name for it. The clinical name is desomorphine. This drug right here, it's a derivative of codeine. The name comes from people who consume it having the appearance of darkened skin, and it kind of makes it like scaly looking, like a crocodile. That's why they call it Krock. It causes necrosis. Basically, it causes your flesh to die. It's a drug. It's a drug that actually eats your flesh. And I'm going to get into some of the details of this because I've actually seen it. I did a little bit of research on it, and I talked to some other people that knew some other people that were familiar with it and that had been affected by it. So I'm going to get into some of those details. The third drug is called isil. That's the street name for it. The clinical name is nitazine. This drug right here is a synthetic opioid, and it's so strong it can kill you just by coming into contact with your skin. It's said to be 100 times to 1,000 times stronger than morphine and 20 times more potent than fentanyl. And that's crazy, man. When fentanyl hit the scene, everybody was freaking out about it. You know, it was killing people across, you know, on the East Coast, on the West Coast. You had law enforcement that were just, when they would come into contact with it, when they would make these large busts, they would open up a container or something, would have no idea that it was fentanyl, take one, you know, they would inhale it, just a little bit of it, and it would either kill them or it would put them in the hospital. You know, there's videos on YouTube that you can actually see of officers that has happened to. So, you know, these three drugs, man, it when you read about the side effects and some of the things that these drugs do to your body, it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing because, for one, it just goes to show you the power of addiction. This drug right here is actually one of these drugs. It actually eats your flesh. It turns it to black, rotting, putrid flesh, where you can actually, if you're standing by a person that has this, that has, you know, it's basically got to that condition, you can smell it. It smells like a dead body. But you know, the power of addiction is so strong that people are still ingesting it, even knowing that it's killing them, even knowing that, you know what, I got this stuff all over my left arm, and my left arm is damn near to the point of amputation. And that's exactly what happens. People get to the point to where the wounds get so deep that they start peeling back skin, and it gets so deep you can see the bone. And if it, most of the time, a lot of the dope fiends that are out there in the streets, they don't go to the hospitals. They don't got the money. They don't got insurance. And they're not thinking about going to the hospital. Their thing is running the streets, looking for a way to get that next fix. So going to the hospital, taking care of their medical needs is just not on the agenda. It's not important. It's nothing that they think about until they just end up falling out and have to get wheeled or flown to the hospital. So let me read one of these articles for you guys, just so we can get into some of the, you know, the details of each drug and how it affects people. And if you're watching this video, you should be seeing some of the pictures. I don't know what YouTube's going to allow us to show, because some of these pictures are graphic and they're hard to look at, but you know, we'll put up what we can put up and we'll see what happens. So Tranq dope, animal sedative, that's what it is. It's mixed with fentanyl. It brings horror to US and drug zones. So everybody was freaking out about fentanyl, but now they're cutting fentanyl with Tranq. It's crazy, man. Listen to this. So over a matter of weeks, Tracy McCann watched in horror as the bruises she was accustomed to getting from injecting fentanyl began hardening into an armor of crusty, blackened tissue. Something must have gotten into the supply. Switching corner dealers didn't help. People were saying that everyone's dope was being cut with something that was causing gruesome, painful wounds. I'd wake up in the morning crying because my arms were dying. That's what she was saying. But what she didn't say is that she stopped using it, even knowing that was having that type of effect on her. She still didn't stop because she was addicted and she had to get well. So she continued to use the drug. In her shattered Philadelphia neighborhood and increasingly in drug hot zones around the country, an animal tranquilizer called xylazine, known by the street names as Tranq, Tranq dope, and zombie drug, is being used to bulk up illicit fentanyl, making its impact even more devastating. I'm telling you, the cartels nowadays, their whole agenda is to just make money. They don't care about the consumer. They don't care about that guy that's out there on the street corner that is addicted, heavily addicted to heroin or crystal or whatever kind of drugs they're addicted to. All they care about is turning a profit and making as much money as they can. Killing people is not their problem. They don't care about that stuff, especially the cartels. Like I said, back in the 80s, when I used to, really be heavily addicted on heroin and I was speedballing, everybody was doing Belushis back then. It was fun to be hooked back then. There was some enjoyment in getting loaded straight up because, you got that either that black tar heroin or you got that El Salvadorian gumball. They used to come in the balloons. And even though all dope is garbage, at least that dope, it was kind of clean. And you got that euphoric, warm, blissful feeling that everybody's chasing when you're a dope fiend. You would be able to go out and get a $20 bag and get loaded and you'd be good. And like I said, the coke, everything was ether based back then. You used to get that taste in your mouth, it kicks you in the chest, you get that rush, and then you want it again and again and again, and you keep chasing it. But now, well, back in those days, people were cutting it with lactose and those kind of additives that weren't dangerous. It wouldn't kill you. It was Simulac, or it was lactose. It was sugar based. Nowadays, these guys will go up under their kitchen sink and they'll grab whatever they can grab. If it's black and it works to cut garaga, they're going to use it. They're cutting garaga with shoe polish, black shoe polish. They're cutting it with whatever, like I said, whatever is black and whatever they can use to put more weight in their supply. That's what they're using. Even everything's cut with fentanyl now. You can't find anything out there that isn't cut with fentanyl. And if you can, you're lucky, or you got a good connection, or they just haven't been exposed to some of the additives that these other guys are using out there. There's no kind of standards that they're using. It's all about just making money, man. So let me go on with this article right here. So xylazine causes wounds that erupt with a scaly dead tissue called eschar. Untreated, they can lead to amputation. It induces a blacktop stupor for hours, rendering users vulnerable to rape and robbery, meaning that basically when you use it, you end up going to sleep. You fall all the way out. That's why, it says that people are vulnerable to rape. Instead of nodding out, getting that feeling, it just knocks you the F out. And I'm saying it like that because I can't cuss no more. YouTube's trying to shut us down. Profanity. They don't even want a guy to cuss no more. That's bad. It's going to be hard making these videos, man. Anyway, so that's what it's doing. It's just knocking your block off. You go straight to sleep instead of enjoying it a little bit, instead of going into that nod and, feeling that warm, fuzzy, hot feeling. You just you fade all the way out. When people come to the highs from the fentanyl, it has long since faded and they immediately crave more. Because xylazine is a sedative and not an opioid, it resists standard opioid overdose reversal treatments, which means that that drug that they use, I forget what it's called, but it's the drug that they use to reverse the effects of heroin. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember it right now. Anyway, that will not reverse the effects of it. Basically, if you OD and you're out there on the streets and the ambulance come and they try to save you and they're doing CPR and they try to hit you with, I think it's called Narcan or something like that. And they try to hit you with some Narcan, it's not going to have no effect. You're out. That's it. And that's why the death rate is so high. A lot of people are dying when they ingest this stuff. It's too strong. It's way too strong. More than 90% of Philadelphia's lab-tested dope samples were positive for xylazine, according to the most recent data. That's crazy. It's everybody's got it. It doesn't matter what connection you got. The main people out there, the main guys that are pushing the weight, they're the ones that are cutting it. And then it's getting shipped out to the smaller guys, and then it's going out to the streets. So by the time it ends up, hitting the West Coast, the East Coast, by the time it hits the streets, it's already cut up and it's already laced with this garbage, man. It's too late for Philly, said Sean Westfall, an outreach worker with Prevention Point Philadelphia, a 30-year-old health services center in Kensington, the neighborhood at the epicenter of the drugs trade center. Philly's supply is saturated. If other places around the country have a choice to avoid it, they need to hear our story. People are trying to get the message out there, man. They're trying to make people aware. This thing right here is beyond an epidemic. And, a lot of us have family members or loved ones, people on the streets that we know, people that are addicted, people that are using drugs, even as recreational, for recreational purposes. If they're not getting educated and you guys hear about this here from, this video or from other places, you guys need to pass that message on to these guys. You need to help them become aware of what's happening. Like I said, even though the power of addiction is stronger than, when these guys understand that it's killing them, they still continue to consume it. You still need to put the message out there. If, especially if you care about people, man, if you care about these people. In December, the Office of National Drug Control Policy said it was tracking the spread closely, and the journal Pediatrics published an analysis of 3 cases of xylazine ingestion by toddlers. That's bad. Even the babies are getting it by, some of the pregnant women. But xylazine's true prevalence is unknown. Hospitals don't test it. Some state medical examiners don't routinely do so either. The drug exists in a legal gray zone. Approved 50 years ago by the FDA as a veterinarian prescribed analgesic, it is not listed as a controlled substance for animals or humans, and so is not subject to strict monitoring. Thus, it has not been on the radar of the federal law enforcement for diversion or abuse. So right now, it's in a gray area. When people die, and they do an autopsy on your body, the medical examiners are not testing for it because it hasn't reached those, there's still a lot of gray area where, they haven't written up policies and ways that they're dealing with it. They haven't mandated that these medical examiners, test for it and things like that. So right now is a dangerous time. As with many trapped by Tranq, Miss McCann's hellish descent began with prescription opioids. In 2009, when she was 27, she developed a dependence on painkillers prescribed after a severe car crash. A boyfriend she met at one of her 6 stays in rehab introduced her to heroin. Cheaper and more potent, fentanyl elbowed heroin off the streets. Then, as the COVID-19 pandemic descended in 2020, Tranq stormed Philadelphia. Last July, she was evicted from her home in Kensington. Last July, she was evicted from her room in Kensington. I was sleeping on the sidewalks, crying every night, knowing that I was better than that, McCann said. Someone next to her got shot. A man tried to rape her, but she defended herself with a box cutter. Watch out for that box cutter. On the hot summer streets, she saw people whose Tranq wounds were covered with fleas and maggots. That's the thing, man. Like I was telling you guys, that's called necrosis. When your skin, your flesh basically dies, it turns black, and it has it's putrid. It has that smell, that distinct smell of death. People can actually be living and walking around with gangreneish wounds like that. And oftentimes you'll see dolphins out there in the streets that are running hard, and they'll have like gauze and medical tape all taped up, looking all crazy, oozing pus. And they don't know what they're doing as far as like taking care of themselves the proper way medically. And it's open, there's flies able to get in there and lay eggs that turns into maggots. I've seen pictures that were just, it's horrendous is the best word I can think of. You would never think that someone would walk around in that condition, but it happens. There's people that just They don't know how to take care of themselves, and they walk around on the streets and they just continue to get worse. I'm talking about arms and legs that just had holes the size of, you could put your hand in there, probably reach around, grab a bone, and see the ligaments and the veins all dried up, and it's bad. It gets bad. And when it gets like that, it's time for amputation. But it's common amongst, intravenous drug users, especially right now when all these additives, these messed up additives are being put in the drugs that are out there on the streets. Even so, she said, I cannot pull myself away from that drug. That's what I said, the power of addiction. Self-destruction at its finest. That's exactly what it is. On a recent chilly afternoon, hundreds of people filled the streets surrounding Prevention Point, carrying used syringes to exchange for sterile ones. Some then made their way to the center's wound care clinic, which has seen 313% rise in visits over the past 3 years, largely because of Tranq. Brooke Peter, a 38-year-old tattoo artist nicknamed the Hood Grandma, rolled her wheelchair to the exchange check-in and handed over a gallon container filled with syringes. Her mother, sister, and wife died of overdoses. Just over a year ago, her right leg had to be amputated because of an infection from a Tranq wound that bore into the bone. But she didn't stop. Miss Peter, who was using drugs in Kensington for 13 years, said she was eager to warn about Tranq, especially to newbies arriving in the neighborhood, lured by its decades-old reputation as a drug marketplace. They come from all over the country. Many arrive with money and pay locals to seek out drugs until they turn into locals themselves. So they go over there looking for drugs, wanting this new drug that everybody's talking about because it gets you high, it knocks you off your feet, and that's all they're focused on. They don't hear about what it does to you as you ingest it, how it kills you, the effects that it has on your body. And then they end up broke, living out there in Philadelphia themselves. That's basically what she's saying. She unrolled a bandage from elbow to palm. Beneath patches of blackened tissue, exposed white tendons and pus. The sheared flesh was hot and red. To stave off xylozine's excruciating withdrawal, she said she injects Tranq dope several times a day. Fearful that injecting it in a fresh site could create a new wound, she reluctantly shoots it into her festering forearm. So she's terrified of taking an outfit of this drug and sticking herself or injecting it in a part of her body that has, healthy skin. Instead of taking a chance of developing another wound in that area, she just takes the outfit and sticks it right into the wound, right into the part of her body that's already dying, that's already decaying. That's crazy, man. That's just crazy. The Tranq dope literally eats your flesh, she said. It's self-destruction at its finest. Tranq dope is an ever-fluctuating blend of xylazine, a sedative, and usually an opioid, which each type of drug binding to different brain receptors. While there is ample research on opioids, there is almost none on xylazine in humans. Though it has been detected in fatal overdoses where opioids were present, its direct correlation with fatality is undermined. Xylazine was developed in 1962 as an anesthetic for veterinarian procedures. Trials in humans were shut down because the drug led to respiratory depression and low blood pressure. Its use as an additive substitute for heroin most likely started in the 2000s. In 2011, a study observed that people in farming areas of Puerto Rico were injecting anesthesia de caballo, horse anesthesia, and developing severe skin ulcers. I don't know if you guys know what skin ulcers are, but basically, when you get an ulcer, a lot of the times it's because you have poor blood flow. They call it thrombosis. And what will happen is you'll get like a open wound that just looks like a burn. And it's red, it's hot, it's festering, and it won't heal. You can have an ulcer, basically it can come up anywhere on your body, but most of the times it will come up on people's legs because when you're injecting drugs it affects your circulation. And at some point, you develop thrombosis where the veins in your legs basically start to constrict and you get poor blood flow. So that's when you start to develop ulcers. And these ulcers can stay, they can stay for 6, 7, 8, 9 months to a year, up to 2, 3 years. It just depends. It takes a lot of, elevating your legs in order to get rid of it. And I want to say, I think they put you on stuff like antibiotics and things like that. But leg ulcers and those type of skin lesions are common with intravenous drug users. Reversing an overdose where xylazine was involved is tricky. A dose of the overdose halting medicine was naloxone, which blocks or reverses opioids' effect on brain receptors, will address the fentanyl, but still won't rouse the victim sedated with xylazine. Desperate rescuers may try a second or third dose, but them not knowing that, it's xylazine, thinking that it's fentanyl or it's an opioid, they'll hit you with 2 or 3 doses of that naloxone and it won't have no effect. So that's why the medical field, I guess they're still learning about it, and it hasn't reached, the point to where, like I said earlier, that they've started to draw up, procedures for people that have OD'd on xylazine. But too much naloxone can put someone in a withdrawal, vomiting and writhing. Responders are advised to check whether the person is breathing. Protect the head and airways, apply 1 dose of naloxone, and call for backup. Even when opioid withdrawal is contained, the harsh xylazine withdrawal continues. People keep using Tranq dope for fear of getting sick, migraines, double vision, nausea, numbness in fingers and toes, sweats and body raking anxiety. There is no medical protocol yet for managing it. Typically, doctors use anti-anxiety drugs to treat the patient's symptoms. So I'm going to cut it with that right there. That right there, just to give you guys a quick overview of what that drug is doing right there. You guys should do your own research on it. Look into it yourself. Like I said, it's called Tranq. You can Google it, or, xylazine. So let me go on to the next drug that's called Krock. This is the drug that eats junkies. That's what they're calling it. So Krock is a derivative of codeine. The name comes from people who consume it having the appearance of dark, discolored skin, resembling of a crocodile. Basically, your skin starts to shave and it becomes discolored. You get a brown type of pigmentation that ends up looking like that of a crocodile. That's why they call it Krock. This causes necrosis of the flesh as well. It eats your flesh. Back in the days when you would be out there in the streets and you'd be shooting dope, if you were going straight mainline and you were, going right into the veins, sometimes if you would miss, you develop a lightweight, what they would used to call an abscess. It, it's a little bit of pus, and it's a lump that develops, and it's as simple as eventually once it, gets to it goes through its stages and develops into a little round ball on your skin, on whatever it's at, your arm, your legs, wherever. It's as simple as taking a bobby pin or something, popping it and draining the pus out, and you were done. That's what was common back in the 80s. However, what's happening now with these drugs that is actually eating the flesh, what happens is it turns black. It turns black, and I talked to people that knew about it, that knew the effects, that it was actually happening to them. And one of them told me that what would happen is they would get like a black, it would look like a scab would almost develop over the injection site where they shot the dope. And it looked like a scab, but it was kind of waxy looking, and it never healed. So what they started doing was they would pull the scab off, and once they pulled the scab off, it almost looked like there was a perfect line all the way around a spot that was like a plug. So they would take some tweezer, like a kind of like some like little pliers, and grab it and pull it out, and a whole plug would come out of just dead, putrid flesh. Those were people that were kind of self-medicating themselves. They were kind of treating themselves because, you know, leaving that flesh in there that was dying, it would end up killing other, you know, healthy flesh around it. So that's a way that this individual was kind of personally taking care of themselves. However, after long-term use, you know, you got these big, deep, hollow, these deep scars and deep lumps because of the flesh that you're pulling out. And you know, it just continues to just destroy your body. Like the article said, it's the perfect example of self-destruction. So let me read this article, a little bit about this article. So like it says, it causes necrosis, flesh dies and turns black. Almost, you know, some people even develop gangrene. Oleg glances furtively around him and, confident that nobody is watching, slips inside the entrance of a decaying Soviet-era block of flats where Sasha is waiting for him, ensconced in the dingy kitchen of one of the apartments that empty the contents of a blue carrier bag that Oleg has brought with him: painkillers, iodine, lighter fluid, industrial cleaning oil, and an array of vials, syringes, and cooking implements. Half an hour later, after much boiling, distilling, mixing, and shaking, what remains is a caramel-colored gunge held in the end of a syringe and the acrid smell of burnt iodine in the air. Sasha fixes a dirty needle to the syringe and looks for a vein in his bruised forearm. After some time, he finds a suitable place and hands the syringe to Oleg, telling him to inject the fluid. He closes his eyes and takes the hit. Russia has more heroin users than any other country in the world, up to 2 million, according to unofficial estimates. For most, their lot is a life of crime, stints in prison, probable contraction of HIV and hepatitis C, and an early death. As efforts to stem the flow of Afghan heroin into Russia bring some limited success, and the street price of the drug goes up, for those addicts who can't afford their next hit, an even more terrifying specter has raised its head. The homemade drug that Oleg and Sasha inject is known as krokodil, or crocodile. It is desomorphine, a synthetic opiate many times more powerful than heroin, that is created from a complex chain of mixing and chemical reactions, which the additives perform from memory several times a day. While heroin costs from $20 to $60 per dose, desomorphine can be cooked from codeine-based headache pills that cost $2 per pack, and other household ingredients available cheaply from the markets. So basically, this is the cheap man's drug. This thing right here is called, this drug right here is also known as poor man's heroin. It's made with, like the article says, it's made with codeine and other types of, you know, readily available household type of additives that you can find in your medicine cabinet. That's why it's easy to make, and, you know, it's cheap. It is a drug for the poor, and its effects are horrific. It was given its reptilian name because its poisonous ingredients quickly turn the skin scaly. Worse follows. Oleg and Sasha have not been using for long, but Oleg has rotting sores on the back of his neck. If you miss the vein, it's an abscess right away, says Sasha. Essentially, they are injecting poison directly into their flesh. One of their friends in a neighboring apartment block is further down the line. She won't go to the hospital. She just keeps injecting. Her flesh is falling off and she can hardly move anymore, says Sasha. Photographs of late-stage crocodile addicts are disturbing in the extreme. Flesh goes gray and peels away to leave bones exposed. People literally rot to death. That's crazy. I mean, when you think about it, it's just crazy, man, that people that are using this shit, at some point they have to see what it's doing to their bodies. But again, the power of addiction is so strong that, you tell yourself, you know what, that'll heal, or that ain't that bad, or, I take some antibiotics, and, these drugs are so powerful that they have a way of just making you, condescending to yourself, you know, and you just keep slipping deeper and deeper into, you spiral, just like this lady that won't go to the hospital. She'll probably end up dying in her lazy boy chair or something until, she'll get to the point to where it's too late to do anything for her medically. He estimates that overall around 5% of Russian drug users are on krokodil and other homemade drugs, which works out at about 100,000 people. It's huge. It's a hidden epidemic, worse in the really isolated parts of Russia where supplies of heroin are patchy, but palpable even in cities such as Tver. So I'm just going to stop right there. This is a long article. It talks about hepatitis C. It talks about contracting other diseases and, the effects of it, dilating pupils and things like that. And again, this drug right here, like xylazine, is in the gray area as well. There's no medical protocol for like when people OD, or what the, first responders are supposed to do when, they inject you with some Noxolone and it doesn't work, or Narcan, whatever you call it, the drugs that reverse heroin overdose. So right now is a dangerous time, and that's why I think it's important that, much awareness that can be brought to this is possible, is needed right now. So the third drug, the street name is isil. The clinical name is nitazene. Isil is a synthetic opioid that's so strong it can kill you just by coming in contact with your skin. This one right here is pretty bad because it has all three components that all these other drugs have. This one right here has all three of them. It's said to be 100 to 1,000 times stronger than morphine and 20 times more potent than fentanyl. That's crazy. Like I said, man, when fentanyl came out, when it hit the scene, people were freaking out about it. You see all these busts all over the news where they're literally catching these cartels with hundreds of thousands of pounds of pills that can kill millions of people. But that's nothing, though. Fentanyl now is the less of the evils. There's always going to be something bigger and badder, and it's going to continue to go like that. I'm sure in the next couple of years, these drugs right here, xylazine, Krock, and isil, will be the lesser of evil of another drug that comes out that's going to even be worse, because you got chemists that are always looking for ways to continue to cut these drugs, to continue to make them stronger, to dial them in, and to put these additives in so that they can have more weight and make more money. That's what it's all about. So let me just read a little bit on this one. What is isil and why is it so dangerous? Drugs have been a serious societal problem since the psychedelic era, but since then, they have been getting steadily stronger and deadlier. From LSD in the 60s to crack cocaine and ecstasy in the 70s and 80s, the potential for addiction has steadily risen. In recent decades, the potency of marijuana has reached alarming proportions. As if that were bad enough, or as if that were not bad enough, the past decade has seen the appearance of highly addictive synthetic opioids and most recently, fentanyl. Each has been responsible for unparalleled levels of addiction and drug fatalities. Fentanyl has already taken overdoses to a new level. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, a record number of Americans have died from drug overdoses, with fentanyl prominent among them. 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, fentanyl was originally intended to sedate patients undergoing surgery. Now there is a new drug in town, isil, that has the potential of sending drug deaths spiraling even more out of control. New strains of this synthetic opioid have appeared in Washington, D.C., that are many times more powerful than fentanyl. Cases have also been reported in Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois, and Florida's Attorney General, Ashley Moody, recently issued a warning about a synthetic opioid called isotenitazine that is 20 to 100 times stronger than fentanyl. As it tends to be mixed with other drugs, users may have no idea that they are using a lethal ingredient until it is too late. Until you inject it and it's already going through your veins, that's when you realize that death is knocking at the door. Isil was the first developed cut, Sandman. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Isil was first developed by pharmaceutical companies in the 1950s as a painkiller. Its use was discontinued due to its many dangerous side effects. The most serious of these is respiratory failure. Isil is found either in crystal form or as a white, off-white, or yellow powder, which can be mixed with heroin or cocaine to make a deadly cocktail or pressed into tablets. But even that doesn't tell the whole story. Drug overdose deaths involving psychostimulants such as methamphetamine are increasing in large part because they are being laced with these synthetic opioids. If isil turns out to be as bad as experts fear it is, the results of its circulation could be devastating. That's all I'm going to read on this one. I just wanted to bring a little bit of awareness to this. I know that, I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore you guys, put anybody to sleep. This stuff can get kind of dry. I just want to bring a little bit of awareness to this, man. I've had a long-standing history with drug addiction myself. You guys know my story. I've told it over and over. I've talked about it. I started using drugs at the age of 12. I struggled with heroin addiction for close to 40 years. And, it was just a different era, a different time when I was using drugs. Like I said earlier on in this video, when I was using drugs, it seemed like there was some standards as far as how far people would go to cut their dope, what they would use. When people are using black shoe polish, household cleaning supplies, and just whatever they can use to cut their drugs just so they can turn a profit and make a little bit more money and not care about that person that's out there that's suffering from drug addiction, not caring if that person lives or dies. That's bad. It's bad. It's not fun to use drugs no more. At least it's nothing like it was when I was out there running around chasing the dragon. Straight up. Again, I don't want to keep going on and on because I'm just going to say a lot of stuff that's repetitive, but I remember back in the 80s, man, and I'm not talking about heroin like I'm not trying to glorify it. I'm not speaking on it like it's a good drug. It's just as dangerous as any of these other drugs in a different way. Heroin is highly addictive, and once it gets you, it's got you, and it can destroy your life. It destroyed mine in so many different ways. I can sit here and I can go on and on about how many different ways it destroyed my life, whether it was relationships, me getting involved in the criminal element, the choices that I made. It goes on and on and on. But at least back in the 80s, it was dope. It was what it was. You don't know what you're getting out there now. You're playing Russian roulette every time you call up that connection and you re-up, you get some more dope, whether it's, you're going to sling it or whether you're going to ingest it, use it. If you're using it, you're playing Russian roulette. Your luck is only going to run so far. You're only going to get by for so long. As time goes on, it's getting worse and worse. There's a lot of things out there that should be a deterrent for you guys that are strung out and using dope, whether it's family, kids. It's just that time in life. Life is passing you by. It's time to stop and enjoy a little bit of life that you got left. Those are things that should stop you. But this right here, this is something that takes it to another level. This is about living and dying. Walking around with your arm, with holes and maggots and flies and pus and, the things that people are going through now. It's just crazy, man. Anyway, I'm not the most articulate speaker. You know, I've tried to put a little bit of awareness on this. I'm not an expert. You know, some of you guys might like this video, some of you might not. It's cool, man. You know, my whole thing is just, like I said, to bring awareness to this. Hopefully this can wake somebody up. You know, somebody will see this and be like, you know what, it's time to stop, man. You know, and if there's one person out there that happens to, then I've accomplished more than, you know, I was set out to do when I decided to cut this video. Anyways, man, this is episode 5 of Curb Talk. Again, if you guys got ideas, man, please go ahead and drop them in the community. I might run that raffle tonight. I'm not sure when you guys are going to get this video. I'll get it over to Sandman so he can edit it. In the meantime, in between time, man, educate yourself, man. Google this stuff. Read up on these articles yourself. Look at some of the pictures. You know, being aware and conscious of what's going on will put you a step ahead of the game. And, you know, it doesn't hurt to at least read up on it and become aware and educate yourself. You might be able to help somebody else. Anyway, with that said, this episode 5 of Curb Talk. And with that, I'm out.